I never expected her to remember my name, let alone the way I take my coffee. It was raining that Tuesday morning. Not the dramatic kind, just a steady drizzle that turned the street into a quiet mirror. I'd been in the downstairs apartment for almost 3 months, long enough to learn the sound of her steps above mine. She walked like someone who didn't rush unless she wanted to. I was locking my door when I heard hers open. She came down the narrow wooden staircase between our units, umbrella in hand, hair pulled into a loose knot that looked like it had been done without a mirror. "You're up early," she said. "I have to be at work before the rush," I replied, even though rush at the hardware store was maybe 6 people in an hour. She held the umbrella over us both as we walked toward the curb. "Coffee first?" she asked. We went to the corner cafe. She didn't look at the menu. She didn't have to. "Medium Americano, splash of cream," she told the barista, nodding toward me. I hadn't ordered yet. "You remembered," I said. She just shrugged, her eyes on the rain streaking the window. "I try to." We sat across from each other at a small table near the back. She peeled the sleeve from her cup, rolled it into a tight spiral. I watched her hands, the way her fingers tapped lightly against the paper before letting it drop on the table. "Big plans today?" I asked. She gave a small, almost imperceptible smile. "Laundry, grocery store, making a very average dinner." "You? Work," I said. "Then, probably more work." There was a pause. Not uncomfortable exactly. More like we were both looking for the right size thing to say. The cafe was warm, but the air between us felt different. "You live downstairs," she said, not as a question. "Yeah. I notice you come in late sometimes," she said. "I hear your door." I nodded. I try to be quiet. Her gaze flicked to mine for half a second longer than necessary. "You're fine." We finished our coffee without much else being said. She left first, touching my shoulder lightly as she stood. It was casual, or at least it could have been. By the time I got back from work, the porch light above the shared door was on, though it wasn't dark yet. My phone buzzed while I was kicking off my shoes. "You left your umbrella in the cafe." "I have it upstairs." I stared at the text for a moment. I didn't remember giving her my number. I typed back, "I'll get it later." Her reply came quickly. "If you cross that line, you can't uncross it." I didn't know if she meant the literal line of the upstairs threshold or something else entirely. Either way, I found myself halfway up the stairs before I'd even decided. Our door was already open when I reached the top of the stairs. She leaned against the frame, holding my umbrella like it weighed nothing. "You could have waited until tomorrow," she said. "I was already here." I lied. She stepped aside. I hesitated, not because of her words earlier, but because of how quiet the upstairs felt. The walls seemed to hold their breath. Her apartment looked like someone lived there alone but didn't mind it. A mug on the counter, an open book on the arm of the couch, a blanket folded, then half unfolded, like she'd started to get comfortable and changed her mind. "Tea?" she asked. "Sure." She moved easily in the kitchen, filling a kettle, setting it on the stove. I noticed the faint sound of rain against the window, the ticking clock above the fridge. "You're from here?" I asked. She shook her head. "Grew up 2 hours north. I moved here after the divorce. Needed a place that felt neutral." I didn't know if neutral meant safe or lonely. She poured the tea into mismatched mugs. "I don't usually have people up here," she said. "I don't usually get invited." She glanced at me then, her expression unreadable. "Maybe I didn't invite you." I smiled without meaning to. She handed me the mug, and our fingers brushed. Nothing dramatic, just skin against skin long enough for me to notice the warmth. We sat on opposite ends of the couch. She curled her legs under her. I stayed upright, my knees angled toward her but not too close. "You remind me of someone," she said after a moment. "Good or bad?" "Someone I knew when I was your age. He was reckless but not stupid." The kind of person who'd do something just to see what would happen. I didn't ask what happened to him. The kettle clicked as it cooled. My tea was already getting cold, but I didn't drink. Some part of me knew the gap between us wasn't just about age. She had her own orbit, steady, self-contained, and I was drifting too close. I don't want to make things complicated, I said. They're already complicated, she replied, almost gently. Silence again, but heavier this time. I thought about all the things I could say. How I noticed her porch light was always on before dusk. How I could hear her humming sometimes when she cooked. How I'd started waiting to hear her footsteps before I left in the morning. Instead, I set my mug down and stood. She walked me to the door. Before I could step out, she reached up and straightened the collar of my jacket. Her fingers lingered, just for a beat. "I'll see you," she said. "I'll see you," I echoed. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. The next time I saw her was 3 days later. I'd been meaning to knock. I even made it halfway up the stairs twice. But both times I stopped, feeling ridiculous. Then I ran into her in the hallway. She was coming back from the grocery store, arms full. "Here?" I reached for one of the bags before I could think. "Thanks," she said, a little breathless. We carried them into her kitchen. I set mine on the counter, waited for her to start unpacking. But she didn't. She just stood there, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You've been busy?" she asked. I shrugged. "Not really. Just..." I didn't finish. She nodded like she understood anyway. A knock on her door broke the quiet. She glanced toward it, then at me. "It's probably Emily." I stepped back, suddenly aware of how it would look, me here in her kitchen, in the middle of the day. She opened the door, and a woman about her age walked in, carrying a folder. "Hey, I've got those papers." Emily stopped mid-sentence when she saw me. "Oh," she said. "This is..." She hesitated just long enough for me to notice. "My tenant. Downstairs." Emily's smile was polite, but her eyes were quick, scanning the room. "Right? Well, I'll be fast." I mumbled something about getting back to work and slipped past them, down the stairs. That night, I kept replaying the hesitation in her voice. My tenant. 2 words that put the air back between us. The next morning, I found her sitting on the back steps with a mug of coffee. The sun hadn't burned off the dew yet. I almost kept walking, but she looked up. "You're avoiding me," she said. "I'm not. You are." I sat beside her. We didn't talk for a while. The neighborhood was quiet except for a distant lawnmower. "I don't want people assuming things," she said finally. "Because they'd be wrong?" She didn't answer right away. "Because they'd be close enough to make it messy." Her mug was half empty. I watched her thumb trace the rim before she set it down. "I keep thinking about that night," I said, "when you texted me about the line." She turned her head slightly, but not enough for me to see her full expression. And I'm still here." For a moment, neither of us moved. I thought she might reach for my hand. I thought I might lean in. But she stood instead, brushing her jeans. "Don't be late for work." I stayed sitting after she went inside, staring at the door she'd closed behind her, feeling the weight of all the words we didn't say. It happened on a Wednesday night. The air was warm enough that the street lamps hummed with insects. I'd been coming back from work when I saw her sitting on the low bench by the front gate, a paperback closed in her lap. "You're out late," I said. "Couldn't sleep." I hesitated, then sat beside her. The wood creaked under our weight. She didn't look at me, just kept her eyes on the sidewalk, the faint glow of the porch light catching the edges of her hair. "Emily asked me about you," she said. "Oh." She said she sees you around a lot. I waited for the rest, but she didn't give it. "Does that bother you?" I asked. A pause. "It's complicated." The night smelled faintly of cut grass. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked once and stopped. I wanted to ask why it was complicated, but instead I said, I don't really talk to anyone else. She gave me a quick glance, like she was checking if I meant it. You shouldn't say things like that, she murmured. Why not? Another pause. She folded the corner of a page in her book, though it was already closed. Because I'll believe you. The bench felt smaller suddenly. My knee almost touched hers. I saw you with someone yesterday, she said, her voice lower now. At the cafe. My coworker. I stopped. You were watching me? She didn't deny it, just stared at the dark street ahead of us. I don't want to get in the way of your life, she said. But I don't like the idea of being replaced before I've even decided if this is something. Her voice caught just slightly on something. You think I'm looking for someone else? I asked. I think you're young, she said. And I think you don't always know what you want until it's gone. The words sat between us, heavier than the air. I thought about all the times I'd almost gone upstairs, all the times I'd stayed up late wondering if she was still awake. I know what I want, I said quietly. She let out a breath, slow and uneven. Don't say that unless you're sure. The book in her lap shifted as her hands tightened. I'm sure, I said. She turned to me then, fully. Her eyes caught the streetlight just enough for me to see they were softer than I'd ever seen them. For a second, it felt like the space between us was gone, like I could lean forward and erase it entirely. But she was the one who looked away first. Tell me something, she said. Her voice was steady, but I could tell she wasn't asking about the weather. The morning after the bench, she wasn't on the steps. No coffee mug. No sound of her pacing overhead. Just silence, the kind that makes you second-guess whether you imagined everything the night before. I told myself she was busy. I told myself not to overthink it. By the third day, I stopped telling myself anything. When I finally saw her again, it wasn't upstairs or in the hallway. It was at the grocery store. She was at the self-checkout, scanning apples and a carton of milk. There was a man beside her, maybe mid-40s, wearing a jacket I didn't recognize. She saw me before I could decide whether to wave. Her smile was quick, polite, the kind you give a cashier. This is David, she said when I walked over. An old friend. David shook my hand like he was checking for something. She tells me you live downstairs, he said. I nodded. Yeah. Nice setup, he said, like he'd been upstairs. I couldn't think of a single thing to say. They left together, the apples in a paper bag between them. That night, I sat on my couch with the TV on low, waiting for the sound of her door. I thought I heard footsteps once, but they stopped halfway up the stairs. The next day, there was a note in my mailbox. Not a letter, just a single line on the back of a receipt. Out of town for a few days. Feed the plants if you have time. No thanks. No name. I went upstairs that evening. The key she'd given me months ago still worked. Her apartment smelled faintly of laundry detergent and something floral. The plants were lined up by the window, their leaves tilted toward the fading light. On the kitchen counter, there was a coffee mug upside down on a dish towel. The one she'd used the first time she made tea for me. I thought about sending her a text. Who's David? Or when will you be back? But every draft felt wrong. Too small or too much. So I typed, the plants look fine. And then I stared at the screen, thumb hovering over send. I didn't send it. I left the apartment the way I found it, locked the door behind me, and went back downstairs. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. She came back on a Sunday evening. I didn't see her arrive. I heard the thud of her suitcase on the stairs, then the faint squeak of her door. I told myself to wait, let her settle in, pretend I didn't notice. But my feet didn't listen. I knocked. Took a moment before she opened the door. She looked tired, hair pulled back loosely, eyes a little red like she'd been staring at the road too long. You fed the plants, she said. I nodded. Yeah. We stood there, neither moving to invite the other in. David's an ex, she said finally. We were married for 6 years. I didn't ask why she hadn't mentioned him before. I didn't ask if she'd seen him for more than coffee. I thought maybe... I started, then stopped. She waited. I thought maybe you'd decided I wasn't worth the trouble. Her eyes softened, but her mouth stayed still. You make things close. Closer than I've been in a long time. That scares me. I leaned against the doorframe. Scares me too. She glanced down at her hands, then back up at me. And if it goes wrong, you're still my tenant. You're still right here. I'm okay with that risk, I said quietly. She exhaled through her nose, not quite a laugh. You say that now. The hallway light above us flickered once. I didn't like seeing you with him, I admitted. Even if I had no right to feel that way. Her voice was even when she said, You have some right. We stood in that small pocket of air between her apartment and the stairs, the kind of space you can only leave by stepping past someone or stepping closer. I don't need an answer tonight, I said. She gave a faint smile. That's good. I'm not sure I have one. I thought about moving back, giving her room, letting the conversation dissolve into the hum of the hallway. But instead, I touched her wrist. Just lightly. My thumb brushed her pulse warm under skin. She didn't move away. Okay, she whispered. It wasn't yes. It wasn't no. But it was real. By the time summer rolled in, the rhythm between us had changed. I still heard her footsteps in the mornings, but now they often paused outside my door before heading down the stairs. Sometimes she'd knock. Sometimes she wouldn't. Just wait for me to notice the shadow under the crack. We didn't talk about what we were. We didn't have to. She started leaving the porch light on for me even if I was home already. I started keeping her tea in my cupboard, the same mismatched mugs we'd used the first night upstairs. Once a week, usually on Wednesdays, we'd walk to the corner cafe. She still ordered my coffee without asking, and I still pretended to be surprised. The barista didn't ask anymore if we wanted to pay separately. It wasn't all soft edges. Some days, she'd get quiet, pulling into herself like she'd remembered something she didn't want to share. I learned not to push. And some days, I'd stay late at work just to have a reason not to explain why I'd been staring at the ceiling for hours. But the bench outside the gate became ours. Late nights, early mornings, it didn't matter. If one of us was there, the other would show up eventually. One evening, near the end of July, we sat there as the sun slipped behind the houses. She was sipping black coffee, too hot for the weather. She claimed it kept the mosquitoes away. I had my own mug, filled with tea she'd made in the apartment before we came down. Remember that night? I asked. She didn't have to ask which one. The bench. Yeah. You told me not to say things unless I meant them. She smiled faintly. And you said you were sure. I still am. She didn't reply right away. Just reached over, rested her hand on my knee. Not a show of affection. More like grounding herself there. The street was quiet except for the occasional hum of a car passing. The porch light clicked on automatically, washing the steps in a soft glow. That light, she said almost to herself. I used to turn it on for me. I didn't like coming home to darkness. And now? I asked. Her thumb pressed lightly against my knee. Now it's just already on. We stayed there until the coffee went cold. When she finally stood, she didn't say goodnight. She just touched my wrist, like she had on the doorstep that evening months ago, and went upstairs. I watched her go, the light spilling over the bench, the steps, the front gate. Somehow I knew it would stay on.